These notes are to talk about decimal place value and four different forms to represent a decimal number. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is decimal value or place value. The regular place value that's not decimal, it's in front of the decimal, to the left of the decimal point, and that would be like the thousands place, the hundred, tens, and ones. And we're just going to make up a number here so we can have something to work with. Somebody's going to write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and 7. Now, if we read this number correctly, we see that there's a 1 in the thousands place, and then there's a 2 in the hundreds place, and then there's a 3 in the tens place, and a 4 in the ones place. So if I was going to read that number, I would read 1,234, right? But when we go to the decimal point, we don't say point, or a lot of people say 1,234.567 or something like that, and that's not the correct way. The correct way to say decimal point is with the word and. So I would say 1,234 and then for the decimal places behind the decimal point, you don't have to read every decimal place value. All you have to do is read the whole entire number behind the decimal and then use the last place value that's occupied. For example, here it would be 567, just as if I was regular whole number, 567, and then you say thousands, because that's the last place value that's taken up. So that's how you read place value. This is how you use a place value chart to figure out which digit is in which place value. So let's expand on that a little bit by talking about the standard form. The standard form of a number is just the regular number that we are used to seeing. So here's this regular standard form. That's just regular numbers. But when we talk about expanded form and expanded notation, let's begin with expanded notation, because that's kind of the one that ties it more to the decimal place value. Since if we have 1,234, we can expand that by saying that the 1 is worth 1,000. So we can multiply that times the value of 1,000 because we're using its place value. So 1 times 1,000, and then we also need to add the next digit, which is going to be a 2. But that 2 is in the hundreds place. So that means that I have to multiply by 100. So that would be 2 times 100. That gives me 200. Then I have to add the next digit, which is a 3. So that 3 is in the tens place because it's worth 30. So I'm going to multiply that times 10. 3 times 10 is 30, so that makes sense. And then I'm going to add the next digit, which is a 4. And the 4 is in the ones place, which means I just have to multiply it by 1. Now, when we talk about the decimal point, remember we said the word and, but in expanded form or expanded notation, we don't put the decimal point to separate our whole number and our decimal part. What we do is just we look at the next digit, which is a 5, and we multiply by its place value, just like the other ones. In this case, it's the tens place, so I need to write it like this, 0.1. Now, it's good mathematical practice to put a 0 in front of it, and I'll come back and do it in just a minute. The next number that I have is a 6, so I'm going to put that on the next number, like plus 6, but the 6 is in the hundredths place with a THS at the end, so I need to put that like that. And again, it's a good mathematical form to put a 0 in front of it, so you can go ahead and put that there, or you don't have to, but it's just good mathematical form to do that. The next number and the last number that I have is a 7, and that's in the thousandths place, so I have to multiply that by 0.001, or the correct way to say it is 1,000th. And again, you can put the 0 in front. Now that was expanded notation. To write the expanded form is not as long because it's a little bit simpler, it looks a little bit simpler, but it's still using place value. So I'm going to do that in purple. So here's my 1,234 and 567 thousandths in expanded form. First, I write 1,000 plus 200 plus 30 plus 4, and means I'm just going to add the next digit, and the 5 is in the tenths place, so it's just time plus 5 tenths, and the 6 is in the hundreds place, so it's going to be plus 6 hundredths, and finally the 7 is in the thousands place, so it's going to be plus 7 thousandths. So the purple is the expanded form, and then the black is the notation, the expanded notation. You can see how they're similar and they're also a little bit different. Expanded notation is when you multiply, And then the expanded form, all of this is just adding, and you don't have to worry about separating the digit from the place value. It's kind of included in one. Now the written form is just like with words. So this one would just be 1,234, and then the decimal point would be the word and then you'd say the decimal, the number behind the decimal, which is 567, and then you use the last place value, which is the thousandths place. Remember that this has a THS at the end because it's behind the decimal, and it's not the same thing as the thousand in front of the decimal. So now we're going to talk about the base 10 blocks, but only for this decimal part, the numbers that are behind the decimal point. I'm going to show you how to model that using base 10 blocks. So we have 5 tenths, a 5 in the tenths place, a 6 in the hundredths place, and a 7 in the thousandths place. So to use base 10 blocks, I'm going to make one big square which represents one whole. I'm going to cut it into 10 sections with 9 lines, and then I'm going to color in 5 of those lines because that will give me 5 tenths. But the 6 would be 6 hundredths, which means I would have to break every one of these tenths, every one of these columns into 10 little parts, which gives me 100 pieces. But I'm just going to cut this little one strip right here, and I'm going to shade in 6 of them because that represents the 6 hundredths. So right now what I have colored in is 5 tenths and 6 hundredths. And then the thousandths is, I would have to cut one of those little squares into 10 little pieces and color in 7, and that's going to be super tiny. So instead of doing that, I'm just going to use little dots here to the side. So each little dot will represent a seventh, a thousandth, 1,000th, and I need 7 of those. Or there's a simpler way to do that. Instead of having a big hole and cut it into 10 parts with 9 lines and everything that I just did, you can just draw the strips, and that will give you 5 tenths. Each strip is a tenth, so we need 5 of them. Then we need 6 hundredths, so that would be like little squares, so we need 6 of those. And then finally the 7 thousandths, I would represent those with just little dots like that. So that's decimal place value, and that is the 4 different ways that you can represent those using the standard form, expanded notation, and then written form and the base 10 blocks model. The next thing is going to be some practice problems. So I'm going to give you these examples, and I want you to use those numbers in standard form and write them in expanded form, written form, and see if you can model them with the base 10 blocks. So you can pause the video and then do it yourself, and then you can come back and check to see if you got it right. Okay, so hopefully you paused it and you checked it and you did it, and now here's where you check your answers. So the expanded form for the first number would be, remember this is expanded form, so we're talked about being the purple one, not the expanded notation. So this would be 4 hundredths plus 4 tenths plus 5 hundredths, and finally plus 6 thousandths. The written form would be exactly like that. It would be just how you say it, 456, and then we have to use the last place value, which in this case it's the tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. So it's 456 thousandths, and that would be with the letters THS at the end. And then the base 10 blocks, that's going to be 4 strips, so it would be like this because that's 4 tenths that we have. And then you have 56 thousandths, or a 5 in the hundredths place, which means we need 5 of these little blocks, 4 and 5. And then finally we need 6 in the thousandths place. So I would draw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 little dots to represent the thousandths place. Okay, and now we're talking about the next problem, which is 1 whole and 38 hundredths. So for the expanded form, that would be really easy. It would just be a 1 plus 3 tenths, so 0.3, plus the 8 hundredths, which would be 0.08, or 8 hundredths. And then the written form would just be exactly what I just said. So it's going to be 1. The decimal is being read as the word and and then you say 38, and then the last place value is the hundredths place, so it's going to be 100 with a THS at the end because it is behind the decimal, to the right of the decimal. And finally, the base tens blocks, what I would do is to draw a hole. I would represent that with a complete one hole right there like that, and then 38 hundredths. So that means that we have 3 tenths because the 3 is in the tens place, and then 38 hundredths means that there's an 8 in the hundredths place. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7, 8. So that would be the model for the second number. I hope that you found this video helpful to you to understand place value and the different forms that we have to write a different number, and plenty of practice. We have some practice problems for you to do, and that's going to be a separate video. Thank you for watching.